Going live on YouTube. Here it comes. We're getting all set up and ready to go. Doing YouTube tips with little metal foxes. Boop, boop, boop. Hi, everybody. It's me, Jennifer from Little Metal Foxes. And I've got,
Julia from Little Metal Foxes.
and
Helen from Little Metal Foxes.
yay, Little Metal Foxes. And we
Just
have,
a full
we have our stick
complement of foxes. All the foxes.
all of our little stick puppets. We're ready to go. Yay. All right. So, hello, ladies. How are you?
Hello.
Hello. So,
Good.
hello in
Yeah.
London. Hello in Seattle. How are you all? Um, so Julia, you're going to be working on a ring for your nephew, right?
I have a ring for my nephew, and then I have a ring for a friend.
Right.
She wanted me to make her wedding ring, and they're married. They're long since married, and she has the engagement ring, but they don't wear wedding rings. They don't have wedding rings yet, and
Right.
so I was like, sure, I'll do this for you.
That's
Um, so so for her, I wanted to do a Mitsuru ring. So I wanted to play with some of your Mitsuru wax for
hmm
that. And this is a good time of year to do that because it's cooled off a little bit. And
Yeah.
so, I need to because that's harder than it looks. Right?
So
It's like,
people are
oh,
like, "Oh,
one
texture.
pop.
Here we
And
go."
then it's like, and then and you make this gorgeous thing, and it's like,
Those people have practiced.
you make it look really easy.
You do.
So I need to work on that. And then the other thing, I have this thing I wanted to carve, a ring I wanted to carve for my nephew. This was a project that he and I had but kind of been kicking around.
Yeah.
And I really need to get on with starting to do that. And so I need to know what kind of wax to use
Yeah.
to
Okay.
carve. I acquired a tool to like cut out the inside of it, which is good. So then I don't have to start like I do have a piece of this stuff,
Yeah.
which is a ring wax.
Yeah. Yeah.
So maybe I could use this. I mean, this is obviously smaller than my pinky, so it would undoubtedly be something I could carve out the center
Yeah.
to make it the right size for an adult
Absolutely.
man.
Yeah. So the
But I
carving
don't know if this is the right thing.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Carving waxes come in lots of different colors and varieties and lots of different shapes and sizes. All of those are out of convenience for different things. So I know that Helen's got a bunch of tubes there too. She's got the blue and
Green.
purple,
A little
green.
hard to tell, but it's green.
I've got gold and purple and green and all those. So that just makes it a little bit easier as far as like a starting place for, making waxes. But Helen, you're doing some waxes with that are on sheet, and you're doing sort of a like a relief cameo
mm,
effect, which is really lovely.
so it's sort of you're building up the wax. Whoops. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, building up the wax on the surface
You
create,
back it up just a teeny bit.
yeah. So using the sheet wax as kind of your backing surface, and then using the green to build up. Oop, back it up a little bit there. It's all digitized.
I know
Yeah.
I'm playing. I'm playing.
No, I think the problem is just that she's in the downstairs of her house and doesn't have
Uh,
terribly good s signal. So I think it's
yeah,
more that.
there you go. So
Whoops.
so yeah,
Yeah.
and so there's lots of different ways that you can work with this. One of the things that I like to work with when I'm casting is a lot of times I'm working with Mitsuru, which is a really wonderful wax, which gives you, really lovely kind of, flowy wood grainy textures, which are just, kind of lovely. And oh, there's one. So it gives you like these like very organic, striations and very flowy sort of surfaces. The other thing that I'm working a lot with is carving waxes, and I do a lot of cuttlefish bone casting too, which I love to do. And I'm also injecting molds, so I'm using injection wax. So I know for a lot of people, when you're first looking at waxes, it's really quite a colorful assortment, and it can be overwhelming, when you're like, I have no idea what all these, why
Right.
it's different colors. Do I just pick a color I like? And the answer is no. Don't
What?
pick. just for the colors that you like. It's like, well, it's purple and I love it. Or I want to make the ring in gold, and so I'm going to use gold wax. It's not quite like that. Yeah. And yeah, she's got the Kate
It's
Wolf.
a Kate Wolf sample.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
Kate Wolf samples are great. So so I can take you over here and show you sort of a nice little assortment at my my bench here. Let me flip the camera over. And Julie, if you want to highlight that.
Sure.
Here we go. Okay, so I've got, quite the little assortment here of waxes. And starting with the carving waxes, you've got different color codes for different strengths or different characteristics in the wax itself. So some of these waxes, these are all carving waxes here that I've got right here. And they usually come in an assortment of blue, green, red, purple, and gold. And sometimes you can even find the silver. And the gold and the silver are usually the wolf waxes. And these are a lovely wax to carve and work with. And you can get it in sheet, blocks, ring tubes, and more. It's a really nice soft wax to be able to carve, but it's clean and doesn't like clog a lot of tools. So this is a great carving wax, the purple or the gold and the silver. The hardest carving wax is going to be the green, which you have in that tube, Julia. And the green is basically the hardest carving wax. You can actually mill and machine the green wax with really fine, like burrs to
Mm-hmm.
carve, and it won't clog those because as you carve, it'll go from solid to powder. It just like powders out of the way. So the nice thing about it is you can get it really shiny and clean and do really intricate details with it without it distorting. The downfall is that it's a little brittle, right? For some
Mm-hmm.
people, it's too brittle to work with when they're working on some different situations. The purple wax, and this looks really dark, but it is actually purple. Um, the purple wax is kind of a medium wax it has some of the best characteristics of the green and the blue, which is actually softer. You can polish it up really nicely. It's really easy to carve with either burrs or files or carving tools like X-Acto knives and things. So it usually will, as you're carving, kind of peel away really nicely, very softly, but it's not so soft that it clogs a lot of your tools. It actually does a good job if you're working with burrs and things. It doesn't clog them too badly. The green won't clog at all, but the purple will clog a little bit and you have to clean it out. The blue, on the other hand, is the softer carving wax. And this is the softest one I have in my studio for a carving wax. And that doesn't mean it's soft like moldable. It just means that compared to these other two, it's still a carving wax, but it is so soft when you carve it. Usually you're whittling it down using like a carving knife,
Mm-hmm.
or coarse files because the blue will clog a lot of tools really easily. But the nice thing is it's a lot more flexible and a lot more forgiving, which is one of the nice advantages to the purple as well. It's much more forgiving and a little flexible. But this has a tendency to clog a lot of tools. So this is good for like bigger general designs that don't need a whole lot of, finesse and fine tuning. So that's what those three different carving waxes are like. And then the gold and the silver, and the gold is usually the most common one you're going to find as far as the Kate Wolf waxes. It's closest in characteristics to the purple. So the purple wax, has a lot of good properties that the other two contain. Same is true with the gold. It has tendency to be a relatively soft wax to carve. You can use burrs, you can use knives, you can use your files, and it doesn't clog them too badly. It polishes up beautifully. It's a little forgiving. So, but it's a little bit oilier and greasier than the purple. So the closest one in the carving range is probably the purple for the gold and silver. They're the same carvability. So if you're working
So
on
the gold, so wait, what's the difference between the gold and the silver waxes?
it's just the color dye. So
Oh, okay. So they're the
um,
same, the material of the wax is the same. It's just that
yes,
the color is different.
right.
Yeah,
The
it's to
blue,
simulate the silver and gold of a ring. So for a client who can't visualize.
exactly right. That's exactly
Ah,
that's why it was invented.
okay.
That's exactly why it was invented. So, you know, a lot of times customers will come and you'll present them with something that's like, here's your wedding ring. And they're like, but it's green and red and there are things in it. And it's like, yep. So we're going to cast that in 18 karat gold. And they're like, is it going to go like, is it going to paint over the top of that? Or I'm not understanding. So for people that don't understand the lost wax casting process, it can be a
Mm,
challenge for them to make that leap from, you know, this to, you know, this is going to be silver, you know, they just can't quite visualize it. So yeah, Kate went to the wax manufacturers and asked them if they could do a different colorway instead of doing these, you know,
mhm.
colors. Could they, you know, work out something else with the dye? And they were like, well, yeah, anything else you want? She was like, yeah, make them so they're kind of close to the purple, but a little smoother. They were like, okay. So, so I'm sure that went through quite a lot of R&D before they got to where they want it to be today. But most of these other waxes, the colors are color coded across the wax industry and the jewelry industry to behave similarly. So
Mhm.
blue is going to be the softest, the purple is going to be a medium, the green is going to be the hardest. So if you get any of these waxes from, you know, Ferris, Kerr, or whoever, you know,
Uh,
it's going to be the same properties, right?
mhm.
Okay. So that's part of it. And the red, there's a red carving wax, and it is definitely the softest. It's good for like really big, bulky things. It clogs everything, and it's just, you know, yeah, it's super soft. It's great for things like rodeo belt buckles and you know, bigger stuff. But
Mhm.
yeah, you can get a lot of stuff done with, you know, those waxes.
Let me ask you a question. Can I ask you a question? So, with a wax like the red, which
Yeah.
clogs really easily, why would you carve in that? What is the advantage that the red wax confers?
Well, like I said, the red wax is a much softer wax. So for people that are carving, I mean, you can carve it with like linoleum cutting tools, um,
Mm.
because it, you know, carves so much, it's so much softer than these
So you
other.
can carve off big chunks of it
Yeah,
really
yeah. So
easily.
it's much better for like very large pieces, that
Okay.
don't require a lot of detail. But yeah,
Is it
there's
less fragile too?
yeah.
Does the hardness, I mean, is the fragility of the wax like is the green going to be the most fragile because it's also the hardest and then it kind of
Yes.
goes down to the red? Is that sort of
Yeah.
also true?
Yes. So the red is going to it's the softest, it's great for big stuff. It clogs all the tools. It's basically annoying, but it's really great for like I said, rodeo belt buckles, you know, big stuff. And it does have a little more flexibility. The blue has flexibility too, and even if you get this in like hot water, it's flexible enough that you can kind of bend it. Uh,
Mm.
Blue is a little bit more stiff, but it does have the a little enough flexibility that it doesn't just crack, you know, under pressure. And but the green will crack under pressure. So this one is definitely the most rigid and won't distort.
Hmm.
This is the least rigid and will distort. Like when you start, you know, pouring investment over it or just sitting on a table, it might like, you know, kind of collapse. So it's not as soft as like sculpture wax. It's not that soft, but it
Hmm.
is out of these, you know, carving waxes, that's the range there, right?
I have a box of wire wax assortment, and it's all blue.
Yeah.
So is that explained? Because it's like it's the hardest wax that you could actually sort of would be soft enough to be flexible enough to bend. Is that why it's
No,
that?
no. So the colors, and this is a great question because I get asked this a lot. So the colors for the carving waxes are solely color indicators for carving waxes. They don't cross
Ah,
into any of the other waxes. So if
okay.
it's a wax that's blue or red, they're not going to have the same properties as carving waxes. Okay. So carving waxes are color coded. The other waxes aren't. Okay.
Okay.
All right, so those are the carving waxes. But what Julia's talking about here is the wax wire, and the wax wire is really great. It's very supple. It's
Mhm.
easy to, you know, braid, bend, make little details, and it comes in all the kinds of profiles that you would be able to get your wire in. So you can get round, square, half round, pear shaped, rectangle wire. So you can get that all those shapes of wire in these. And these are extremely soft and flexible. So they do, have a nice moldability to them. You can shape them, but they're sturdy enough that if you were trying to make something like a prong out of it, you could easily sort of shape it, into the shape you want. Um,
Ah, is that what they're used for a lot? Is things like prongs?
things like prongs, ring bands, all kinds of stuff. You can, they're soft enough that you can kind of braid them and twist them and do some really cool stuff with them. So, these are, lovely wires to work with. If you're using something, it's a little bit bigger for a ring band, the half round, the rectangle wire is great for doing stuff like ring bands. So, yeah.
Mhm.
So you've got some options there. So wax wire is a nice sort of accessory wire, accessory wax for what you're doing.
Mhm.
Some people
Mhm.
do stuff just straight out of wax wire, but they also use like sheet wax. So most wax wire that you're going to find is blue. All right. However, talk about sheet wax in a second here. The other thing that you'll see in rods like that is sprue wax. And
Mm.
the sprue wax is used to support the wax models in the mold.
Mhm.
Can be used like wax wire, but it's far stiffer so that it supports the model in the mold so it doesn't like flop over. The blue
Mhm.
waxes are very soft, so they will easily sort of squish. But you'll see a lot of the sprue waxes will come in different colors just depending on the company that makes them. So most of them do it in kind of a reddy color like this. Some do it
Mhm.
in the yellow, but you can also use wax wires for sprues for, like little ancillary sprues and support. So these are not color coded in the same way that um, oh, the carving wax is. But
Mhm.
wax sheet, and this is kind of nice because wax sheet comes in, you can get it in the same sort of gauges that, again, you can get your metal in. So you can get, very thin up to, like 2 gauge, I believe. And it comes in a couple of different colors as well. Um, with the sheet wax, you've got a clear or impression wax. You've got the green wax, and you usually have like pink sheet wax. And these three are really similar. The main difference is the clear and the pink are a little more they're a little bit stiffer, but they are all bendable and moldable into different things. The green sheet wax, however, is much more sensitive and can be easily used almost like a sculpture wax. You can just get it warm and twist it and pull it and do some interesting things with it. But if you get it warm in some water, you can actually like push it over a texture and pick up really lovely textures with it because it's so much more sensitive.
Thing. Okay.
So you've got, three waxes that are good for things like bezels and little details. And I would just say, think about with these, how heavy you want your gauge to be on your earrings or on a ring, and use that or a slightly heavier gauge when you're working in wax. So if you've got, and one of the things people do is they'll always go thinner, and don't do that because it's going to be so weak by the time it's cast. If it's like, you
Mhm.
pick up
So
this and go, oh,
shrinkage, right?
well, not just shrinkage, but the people will pick
Just
up,
overall structural integrity.
yeah, the structural integrity. So this is like 24 gauge sheet wax. If I did a ring in 24 gauge, it'd be really thin and flimsy.
Oh, sure. Yeah, fair.
So, and it's cast metal, not machined, so it has a lot less structural integrity. So yeah. So I usually go with if I'm going to make it in 20 gauge, I might go with an 18 gauge wax, right?
Mhm.
So the ultimate goal would be to make it, just a little bit beefier so you have some structural stability. Um, some of the other waxes that are kind of fun are and there's a whole, catalog of injection waxes. And injection waxes are solely used for the purpose of injecting wax into a mold. So they are made to work hot. They're usually you're putting them into a melting pot that you can force the wax melted into like a rubber mold. And these come with lots of different characteristics for like its flowability, how much it
Mhm.
shrinks, the carvability, that you can work with it after it's been put into a mold. So there are lots of different colors that have different characteristics. So you always want to look at like the shrinkage, the carvability, the memory, so that if you inject it and pull it out, is it going to go back to the shape that it's supposed to go to, so it has a high
Hmm.
standard when it does that. So there's a whole litany of a whole catalog of injection waxes that are used just for that.
Hmm.
And these little accessory waxes are fantastic for helping you put the wax together. And
Right.
one of the things that Helen was holding up is her
Sticky wax.
the is the skeleton, and the skeleton was done
Oh,
using
sorry.
like green wax, like green carving wax applied to sheet wax, right?
Yep.
Just working with it hot and dribbling it on, because the green wax will go from solid to liquid really quickly. It doesn't get
Hmm.
viscous. The purple goes from solid to viscous to liquid, and the blue never goes liquid, it stays viscous. So when you're working with something like the green wax hot on a surface, that's usually referred to as a buildup wax. But they make buildup waxes. This is Mike's Perfect Purple, and this is the Kate Wolf Relief Wax. So these two waxes are great for doing like intaglio drawing and build up on waxes. They're great for filling in
Mm.
holes. They're great for sort of drawing on the surface, and they're very buildable, and they're both very carvable, which is nice. So once you sort of build up a surface, you can carve back into it and it'll retain its details. The nice thing about those is you can see them really well when you're working with them. And they go from solid to liquid, much like the green does when you're working with it. But I like using these because they have a really nice flow when you're working hot with them. So those are really great. And then the one thing that is, I think, essential is the sticky wax. And sticky wax comes in um, chunks and rods like this. And it basically is kind of like the hot glue of the wax world. So if you like stick something together or add two different waxes together, and you can use, like wax wire or, something on like a carving wax, you can put things together, but you need something kind of like a solder for metal.
Right.
These help hold that together. Um, the one kind of wax I haven't talked about is sculpture waxes. And sculpture waxes are great because there's like a brown microcrystalline wax that's really great.
Yeah, I have a big chunk of that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Victory Brown, isn't it?
Victory brown, yeah. And and there's stuff like Mitsuru. This is my Kitsune wax, which is a Mitsuru blend, and it's basically made with like beeswax and resins and stuff. And it is really wonderful because you can kind of, there we go, break off a chunk, warm it up in your hands, and then work with it, and it gives you these nice long sinewy uh, surfaces that
Hmm.
just beautiful, that you can use for things like there we go, oh, there it is, that you can use for things like bracelets and rings and pendants and earrings. But it has, this really lovely kind of fibery sort of look to it. But that's what it's usually known for. But it's a
Hmm.
type of sculpture wax. And when you cast these, it comes out with that texture. So you have all that sinewy quality, in your
Hmm.
um, and you can do similar things with sculpture wax, but it doesn't usually produce that kind of like sinewy surface that
Right.
the Mitsuru makes. Um,
It's a taffy that it's because you're pulling it like taffy and you get the striations in it the same way that you
yeah,
see those lines in taffy.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
the same kind of idea. It's so beautiful.
yeah,
It's a
really is.
very specific thing, right? Like you're not going to use it for a bunch of different things, but when you want that flowy hair, grass kind of
Absolutely.
bamboo leaf texture, this
Yeah.
is the way to get it.
And it really is. I mean, that'd be, next to impossible to carve right into the
Right.
wax with all the texture that it's got. And so working in a sculptural way sometimes is a good way to go, whether it's, instead of working, I mean, when you're working with carving waxes, you're working reductively. When you're working with the wax sheet and wire, you're working kind of in an additive way. And then when you're working with stuff like the sculpture waxes, you're working in more of a sculptural way. So you've got a couple of different groups that give you options for working, that can suit the needs that you've got. So you don't have to look.
Oops, we lost your audio, Jennifer. Something happened.
Sorry, yes, I hit a button. Um, I hit the wrong button. So,
And she's back.
and I'm back. Hey there. So there are, three basic kinds of groups that you can sort of pick and choose from to create the wax models that you want. It doesn't
Hmm.
all have to be carved, it doesn't all have to be sculpted, it doesn't have to all be constructed. You might choose like to carve part of it and then sculpt something that's going to be added on. And so you can work in a lot of different ways with the wax. And
Hmm.
getting your hands into it and working with it is a great way to just sort of practice and play. It's not real expensive either, which is really kind of nice because if you don't like something, do another one, not
Right.
every wax you carve is you may not want to cast every wax you carve, and that's okay, So yeah, I know people that are like, I carved this wax and I'm going to cast it. And I'm like, I think it needs some work still. And people are like, I like the bulkiness. I'm like, yeah, that's going to be 10 ounces of metal on your ring, and that's not wearable. They're kind of like,
Yeah, that is one of the things I remember when the little bit of carving and casting I've done, because I carved a ring that's a pangolin, that the tail of the prehensile
yeah,
tail pangolin is wrapped around your finger. And I spent a lot of time because it's got this humped shape with dental tools carving out
All
the
the scales.
inside. And I carved all the scales, but I also spent a lot of time, like scooping out the pumpkin, the humped part, scooping out the inside to try to reduce the mass because I just didn't want it to be this super top heavy thing.
yeah.
Um,
And that also not only makes it like functional, not function well, because if it's too heavy, it's not very wearable, but it also makes it very expensive. And thirdly, it doesn't cast well if it's solid like that. So
right.
it usually casts better when it's a much more even surface. So different waxes will allow you to have that ability to sort of carve out the inside easily or
Hmm.
to carve those scales very precisely. So something like the green wax or the purple might be great for that because you can get like all that little detail. In fact, the green's probably the better way to go, for something that has very high detail. And for something that's like a little looser, a little more flowy, the blue wax would be better, So
I
it
think it
just,
was the blue that I used for the pangolin.
oh, really? Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
well, it was a class,
Yeah.
or Seattle College, and so it didn't have a lot of pieces that were sticking out,
Right.
right? It was mostly just there was a lot of surface design on it
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
the scales.
Well, and most people that especially when they're first learning to carve waxes, aren't as sensitive to the differences in the waxes at first because they'll start working with what they've got and it's like, okay,
Hmm.
this down to do something. And as you sort of are working and you find your
Your
groove,
groove, your mojo, yeah,
yeah, you find your mojo in the wax, and it's like, this is too soft. I need something that's going to give me better detail. Or this is too hard, it keeps breaking. It's like you
right.
can find something that's a little bit closer to what you need as you work. And like I said, it's not an expensive endeavor to get like a box of wax that's gonna, because I mean a box of purple wax, unless you're
Yeah.
doing protection, is gonna last you a long time. you
You
know
know, I have a couple of pounds of wax. It's like
yeah,
they're
it'll.
gonna outlive me.
So one of the things to know too, though, and a lot of people don't realize this, they're like, oh yeah, I've got wax in the attic, and I'm like, yeah. Or I've been keeping it out in the basement or the garage, I'm like, does the garage freeze and get hot? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, oh, you might have a problem. So, especially stuff like the wax wire and wax sheet is especially susceptible to expiring.
Extreme
Um,
temperature change.
yeah. So waxes don't like to be frozen. It changes their molecular structure, their crystalline structure. And if you take something like the wax wire and freeze it, it will turn it into like glass. It just, and it won't ever be the same again. You can't get it back to that really supple working thing. So you might as well
Okay.
throw it because it's so brittle, it's done. So you might can use it for something, but I mean, basically it's expired and it's not going to work the way you want it to. And the same thing is true with like the sheet wax. So if you have sheet wax and you kind of like can hit it on the counter and it goes to a bunch of pieces like glass, you know that it's probably not going to work. And it'll work to cast it. It should cast fine, but you'll not be able to work it like it's supposed to
You
work.
can't form it to make a thing to cast. It'll just shatter on you. So
Right.
instead
So
of don't buy, set the frustration aside, just buy some fresh,
try fresh wax.
start
Yes.
over. Right.
And don't have as big an issue with things like the slices and the tubes, because it's so much more body in that material that it doesn't dehydrate the way that the other ones do. They have so much more surface that
Area.
yeah,
Hmm.
surface area that they have a tendency to dehydrate and just not it like oxidize, like chocolate kind of. Yeah,
Right. But the bloom on chocolate doesn't hurt you and you can still eat the chocolate.
that's true.
Whereas if the wax has got a bloom on it, maybe it's time to just
That's that's bad
move
news.
it on.
But yeah, I've had people that have gotten wax or I inherited wax from somebody else and I'm like, is it still, especially wax wire, can you still bend it? And they're like, no. I'm like, throw it out. It's around the bend. So
It's around the bend.
around the bend.
Oh, what you did there.
So yeah.
That's
But
too funny.
yeah.
Yeah. So yes, well, that's very helpful. So
It's still
the tube of green that I have, that's great because I could start my wax with that, right? It's supposed to be sort of a signet ring kind of shape with
oh yeah.
a creature on the top and the tail underneath. So, I could start with that. I now have the matte wax reamer that I got from the Seattle Metals Guild silent auction, go silent auction. Um, and that'll help me because I don't know what size my nephew's finger is, right? Like we had a whole conversation about the design, and I was like, that's a key point. So I'm gonna have to go back. I need to start doing some carving and figure out, doing some designs and experiment with some stuff.
Well,
But then I also need to find out from him how big his finger is.
one of my favorite tips for working with the rings in particular is let me see if I can find it here real quick because you can use like auger bits.
Oh, right, paddle bits.
What do you call it? Paddle bits? Yeah,
Paddle bits. Yep.
paddle bits. That was my high school name. Paddle bits. But you can use you can use like chunks of wax. You don't have to have the ring wax to make a ring.
Right, right, right.
So you can use like the block wax or chunks or slices and use something
Yeah,
like
'cause
that.
mine are solid. They're not open in the middle.
Right. And then just
So
you
I would
can't use those on the tubes though, right?
yeah, you can. And I usually do it by hand. So I'll like
To
do it,
ream them out.
yeah, and just like carve it out because that's
Oh.
nice and sharp. And because you can get these in, specific sizes, you can make, get them close to the size, but like slightly smaller
Has
than
to be
what you
slightly smaller.
slightly smaller. So you can get a couple of like a set of paddle bits, and these are really great for like grilling the wax. And you don't even have to use the drill for that. I was talking to somebody recently, and she goes, "Yeah, I was doing that, and I was putting it into a vise, and then like and drilling and making my own wax tube." And I was like, "Oh, that's great. Yeah, very smart." So yeah, but these can be really helpful. Just make sure you drill a like a center guide hole before you start, because it's like that'll take a really long time. So, but you want to get it down to the surface where you can kind of start winding.
Perfect. Yeah, right. No, cool.
Yeah.
See, tools you may already have in your house, right? This is perfect. So I'm hoping people are going to get excited about your casting for the small studio class because I think that's really fun. I mean, because it's being able to do the wax carving and then actually do something with it rather than having to
Right.
send it out
Right.
is
And that
really
is the thing that stops most people from
from
casting.
doing it. Hmm.
Making it more accessible.
Right, right.
So,
So,
making it so that it's affordable, that you can set it up here and then put it in a drawer when you're done. It's not, gonna
And
take
it's
up.
not like the huge, like I have a table
That
here.
vacuum chamber thing that Maggie has.
The vacuum chambers, or like the huge centrifugal broken arm casting, like it would take up half my table. I don't have that kind of room in my studio. And there are some safety concerns with those. Like you really need to know what you're doing. And so there
But
are
when you're
ways to do
working,
it.
yeah, but when you're working small scale, when you're scaling
Mhm.
it down and you're casting maybe a couple of rings or a couple of pairs of earrings or something that's, really small, and it's like, or you're casting Mitsuru, for example, and you're like, I don't want to send it out. What can I do? And that's one of the things that came up a lot lately with the Mitsuru class. People were like, how do I ship it out? How do I send it? And that can be really
Right, because it's
tricky.
so fragile,
Yeah.
right? Because
Yeah.
it's fragile, and if you don't want to ship it when it's warm, because you don't want your ring to get to the caster and be this shape.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but it will give everybody a lot of options as far as, being able to work small, being able to work immediately. So you don't have to plan, because a lot of times in a production studio, I mean, you have to be able to like reproduce everything the same all the time. So you're really trying to achieve bigger goals when you're working with production casting. And if you're working in a studio like at a school, they have like the industrial setup. They don't have something usually that is designed for small spaces and small studios.
Right.
And
And
so
that can be
being,
really intimidating. Then you feel like, oh, I have to have all of that big industrial stuff. And it's like,
yeah,
no, you can do it with less.
yeah,
But it does take some thought, and it does take some ingenuity. And Jennifer will help you with that.
yep, it's pretty fun. So there are a lot of ways to do it, but yeah, setting it up so that you can do it like right on your solder bench, So if you have room for your solder bench, you'd have room for a casting setup. So yay! So
Excited.
that's coming.
I
So
know. I need to get going with making
yeah.
some of these rings, and then we can cast some of them too, so you can have some pictures for you.
There are a couple of companies, and you may have to look around, for those people that are like, I still just want to get my hands on all of it.
Mhm.
Some people make, and I think it's Ferris, Matte, or Kerr. It's one of the three of them, which make most of the waxes that are out on the business end of things. And Rio used to carry one of them that was like an assortment of waxes. It was like a little kit that had sticky wax and buildup wax and sheet and wire and all of the waxes that you would want to like get your hands on, carving waxes and stuff. And
Like a
so you could,
sampler.
yeah, it was like a little Whitman sampler pack of waxes. And it's really kind of nice when you can get something like that or find
Right.
that and kind of, get your hands in it if you don't know. But if you're
Right.
like, yeah, I want to carve, that's what I want to do, get a couple of different colors and go to town, get some slices, if you're going to do rings, get some rings, ring blanks, and, makes it a little bit easier. So, yeah. But
Well,
yeah,
we can look for the sampler pack, and if we can find it, if we can find if it's still being carried, we'll put a link to it in the description for the video.
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. All right, my ladies.
All
That's
right.
today.
Thank you. This is
Yeah.
exciting. I should get going on that
Little
project.
intro to choosing a wax.
Using a wax.
Yeah. Helen,
First step.
talk about before we go, what's the process for your intaglio process for the wax?
Oh, well, I wouldn't call it Natalia, but I
Not
just
not well,
basically, well, hold on. Gonna
cameo,
drop it on the floor.
the cameo process that you do.
Ugh. So what I did, because I didn't know anything about anything. I just knew that one of my studio mates used the green wax to do a lot of carving. So I just got blue, I got green, and then I had some sheet that I had on hand already. Um, there's a lump there that I used to scoop with my hot pen thing. And then
Hmm.
I just spread like sort of like, sandcastle drip, and just build up the figure on the pink. Because I wanted to keep it kind of flat. And this is just a play around, to find out and FAFO. And just to see, what I could do. So that was pretty cool. So I want to try and do more. Obviously, I want to eventually cast it.
Yeah.
Probably with PMC versus,
So
um,
you use those a lot
Sterling.
for making molds too, right?
Yes. And that's one thing I too wanted to say too is like you can do a single casting and then make a mold of that, and then that could be, turn into a production piece if you take the casting class with Jennifer. That's, you're not limited to one-offs.
Yeah. But with the
But
glass and making like a silicone mold from that, you can do a
oh yes, with powdered glass. Yes, I can make these in powdered glass as well.
and
I don't have to
PMC.
limit it to
And
metal. Yeah.
and you could make a silicone mold from the wax, correct?
Right.
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
you're not heating it. So the vulcanizing molds you can't use, like the old-fashioned rubber molds, you can't use to make a mold of something that's wax because it'll melt the thing.
Yeah. Also,
So is the
Yeah.
vulcanized molds are very expensive to make. So
is the green wax the one that it liquefies immediately when you heat it? Okay,
Yes.
so basically you made it a liquid and then you kind of dripped it into the spots, and then after it was cold you could like carve it, or you could heat it with the pan again and smooth it.
Yes, correct. And which is why I also got the mini tools, the micro tools, whatever these are,
Kate Wolf, wicked sharp,
micro
careful.
carvers, so I could go back in and do a little more work.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, the micro carvers
Yeah.
are so tiny. Teeny tiny tools. Yeah, they're great. Okay. Well,
Right.
thanks. Well, Julia, I look forward to working with you on the rings, and
Excellent, thank you. I look forward to having your help because
yeah, I'll do a little play
everyone
date.
needs friends who can help them cast their stuff.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And if not, maybe you can do it in your own studio with the tools that you have there. So who knows? We'll see.
I'm gonna come to your studio. It'll be much more fun to do it with a friend.
Okay. All right. All right, my colorful friend in London. I will see you later. Julia, I will see you later. You all have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you next week for Tool Tip Tuesday. Bye, everybody.